Listen, the chairs in my doctor's office are so comfortable. Are yours? No. Okay. Well, you need to see my doctor then. The chairs in my doctor's office are so comfortable, and I'm so glad for this because it seems like we have to wait so long. You have to wait a long time in your doctor's office? There's an excitement, right? When they call your name, it's like, oh, it's my turn. And you get to go back to another place to wait, right? It's like you get to that exam room, yes, I've arrived, and I'm going to wait some more. All right. This feels like Advent to me. Arriving just in time to wait. But to actively wait, to participate in that faithful kind of waiting. In our current Advent series, Our Spirit Waits, is teaching us of what it means to be actively, faithfully participating in this wait work. Last week, it was all about being in a posture of hope, of seeing the reality of our lives, but knowing that Christ is our hope with us no matter what, right? That knowing that anchor, that Christ the Lord holds us in steadfast love, safe and whole with him. And so our Advent work is to then decide, to make that decision, to stay tethered to that anchor, and to learn to put this in practice in our own life and in the world. And so today, the second Sunday in Advent, peace. All throughout our fall scriptures, every last one of them, the prophets have been giving the people warnings from God, but the people have been complacent and self-centered and selfish. And they have found places of solace in things in their own way and not in the ever-present Spirit of God, like right with them. And Isaiah preached this until he was blue in the face, and it didn't amount to much until Babylon, until Assyria, until the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom alike were both just so overrun with enemies who caught them with their guard down, and now they are in desolation, desert in the middle of a holy land. I wonder who remembers the TV show Lost in Space? Anybody? It's in the mid-1960s, and it was about this family, the Robinson family, and they're traveling around all of space, but they get lost, and they're trying to make it back to Earth. And there was a robot. Remember the robot? With those arms that looked like dryer ventilation tubes, right? And so the robot would always go to Will Robinson, the boy, and he would announce when something bad was about to happen, and he would roll over to Will, and his arms would be flailing. And what did he say? Danger, danger. Oh, say it with like a real vibrant. Ready? Danger, danger. This is what the prophets are doing. They're making a beeline for the Israelites, arms flailing, warning, warning. You're going off course. Something bad is about to happen. You're going in the opposite direction from God. The people of Israel, goodness, they're just no different from you or me, right? Don't we all go off course from time to time? Don't we all need a robot prophet to shout to us, warning, warning? I feel so akin to the Israelites, so similar. And this is our human condition, to go our own way. And God has allowed them to do that, allowed them to feel and experience the natural consequences of doing that. At times, it was seeming to them that they had been abandoned by God altogether. They were allowed to be exiled and allowed to be ruined and allowed to be ruled by other peoples. It felt like they were just left out there to die. Even with all those warnings, they kept wandering and they kept walking away from God. And so we get to this scripture, and we're expecting God's wrath to have its way, expecting all the people to be judged by God, expecting the people to get what's coming to them, to finally get what they deserve. And they're anticipating the same. and they brace themselves for what's coming. I mean, they've been hearing warning, warning the whole time. But instead, God comes and says, comfort, comfort my people. Speak softly and tenderly to Jerusalem, but also make it very clear that she has served this sentence. Her sin is taken care of. She is forgiven. She's been punished enough, more than enough, and it's done. She has received from the Lord double punishment, double comfort. This is our God. This is our God. God reconciling God's people to himself. God making peace with God's people. And God's peace looks just so very different than what we often mean when we say peace. We might mean that everyone is just managing to get along, or that arguments or fighting stops. Anybody just white-knuckling it sometimes through Thanksgiving dinner? Right? Like, don't talk about this, please don't talk about that. Just bring up, how's the weather? That's what we're going to talk about, right? We just manage, everybody just please get along. Perhaps it's because one person has finally made their point and the other person just grows quiet. Sometimes that's what we mean by peace. Or in war, it means that perhaps one side has caused enough damage to the other side to make the fighting stop or make the enemy retreat. Sometimes we call that peace. One of the most often used words associated with the coming Messiah, especially during this time of year, is peace. And peace, of course, is not merely the absence of conflict. The peace of Jesus is much deeper, and it's more challenging. The peace of Christ is reconciliation, a putting back together again of relationships and realities that have been torn apart by sin and suffering. It's the kind of peace, the peace of Christ, that is wholeness. The Hebrew word shalom, radically different than our understanding of peace. God's peace is just peace. The offer of complete, holistic wholeness, body, mind, soul, where everything, all is made well, even when, especially when, we don't deserve it. That's God's peace. An American poet, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, from the 1800s, he met one time with very great tragedy in 1861, where his wife, whose name was Fanny, she was sitting near an open window, and she was sealing locks of her daughter's hair in a packet using sealed wax. Why? I don't know. But she was sitting by the window sealing this hair in a packet when all of a sudden her dress caught fire and she was engulfed in flames. So Longfellow is asleep in the next room, and he hears her screaming, and he comes out and he tries to rescue her and just surrounds her with himself and tries to put out the fire. He was severely burned himself on his face and on his hands. She slipped into a coma, and she died the next day. So 3 years later, Longfellow is still in despair and still grieving, and he penned the words in the midst of his grief to "I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day." He needed to find comfort and peace, and so he wrote these words. "I heard the bells on Christmas Day, their old familiar carols play, and wild and sweet the words repeat of peace on earth, goodwill to men." During the time in our country when he wrote that, the Civil War was in full swing. The Battle of Gettysburg just not long past, and the days looked really dark. And he asked himself, how can I write about peace on earth, goodwill toward men in this state of our country, where brother fights against brother and father against son? And so he kept writing his next words. "And in despair I bowed my head. There is no peace on earth, I said, for hate is strong and mocks the song of peace on earth, goodwill to men." Last week we spoke of actively waiting during Advent by taking on the posture of hope. And this week it's the same idea, but how do we take on the posture of peace? Isaiah leads us to the answer. A voice cries out, "In the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, and make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be lifted up, every mountain and hill be made low. And the uneven ground shall become level, and the rough places become a smooth plain. And then the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all the flesh shall see it together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken." And so what is the answer? How do we respond to God's call on our lives during this Advent season? The first thing, number one, we become quiet before the Lord, taking on a posture of peace. And this posture means that we ask the Lord to level anything in our own hearts that needs leveling. Valleys filled in and mountains torn down and rough places smoothed out. Anybody have any places like that? Hurts that need filling and healing. Habits or ideals that need to be torn down. Hang-ups or things that you cannot let go of that need to be smoothed out. A posture of peace is the quiet wait work before the Lord. A willingness to be before the Lord, to be made whole, to be made right before God. And it's in this work we discover for ourselves that we don't get everything we deserve either. We get comfort, forgiveness, and reconciliation and peace too. The second thing, we become peacemakers in the world, pointing to God. We go out into the world and we emulate that just peace that we have received from God. The very same generosity of peace and justice and reconciliation. Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God." He didn't say, "Blessed are the peacekeepers," right? This is different. Peacekeepers do anything they can to keep conflict or violence at bay, even if it is a false sense of harmony. Peacekeepers do not resolve any of the issues. They just stop the outward sign of the inward conflict. This is human peace. This is peacekeeping. I am chief among them. Peacemakers, however, it's different. Peacemakers are acting from this deep well of peace that they have experienced from God, and they catapult it into the world with the same kind of extravagance. This kind of peace is riskier because it refuses to stand by while people are suffering, people are hurting, people are hungry. Peacekeepers get to the root of the conflict and they work towards eradicating it. It is a slow work. God's just peace becomes our just peace. And we actively pursue this for all humankind and all of creation. Henry Longfellow, writing that verse, "There is no peace on earth," he turned his thoughts to the Prince of Peace. And he continued writing. And he said, he wrote this last verse, "Then pealed the bells more loud and deep. God is not dead, nor doth he sleep. The wrong shall fail, the right will prevail, with peace on earth, goodwill to men." And Isaiah echoes this. Isaiah says that we should be shouting this from the rooftop, saying, "Look, here is your God." And we show them how we have stopped warring with ourselves and warring with God and warring with others. And we become a testimony that God is not dead but is alive and well and offers all of creation the peace that passes our own understanding. The peace of the Lord Christ, who will turn everything the way it should be, not through violence, but with peace. Who are some peacemakers that come to mind when we talk about this? Maybe Gandhi or Mother Teresa, Desmond Tutu. So many, right? Peacemakers sometimes seem extreme in the world. We might look at them and say, oh, I could never do that. Doing things to comfort the afflicted often makes us, who are insulated by the comfort of our own making, upset and unnerved, uncomfortable. Perhaps most famous for his work, Martin Luther King Jr., his tireless work for civil rights, for just peace, changed our world. Not just our country, changed the world. Working for change and offering comfort to those who were suffering felt uncomfortable to those who were inflicting harm in the first place. And he said, there can be no justice without peace, and there can be no peace without justice. He said, this is the work of peace, the inescapable work of mutuality. This links us together. Nobody is free, he said, until everybody is free. Meaning, I am not at peace until you are, and you are not at peace until I am. And we are truly not at peace as a body of believers until all the world and all creation is at peace together. And this must be the work of not just one, for how could it be, but us all. And so there is work to be done together. And there are roads to be made straight for those who struggle, and there are valleys to be filled in, and mountains to be torn down, and rough places to be smoothed out for those who are continually experiencing harm. Perhaps the thought of just peace work in the world feels a little daunting. I mean, maybe sometimes we might feel, as Longfellow did, overwhelmed by the state of the world. I mean, where do we even begin? Janice Stanfield said, I cannot do all the good in the world that I cannot do all the good that the world needs, but the world needs all the good I can do. And so it goes for us as peacemakers, responding to God's peace offered to us. We cannot make all the peace that the world needs, but the world needs all of the peace that Clearview can make. To take each moment we are given and to put ourselves in that posture of peace before the Lord, the kind of peace that was meant to be from the very beginning, page 1 of the scriptures, where we see one another as sacred, where we see each other as God sees us, where the world would call us enemies, we say, no, we are neighbors, and where we do whatever it takes for this to be a reality right here and right now.